Hey, we're going to try this one more time. Thanks for sticking with us. If this works, we'll be good. If it doesn't work, then we'll figure out another time and reschedule it. But thank you for your patience. Technology is a great thing when it works. So we'll see if we can get that. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for coming back. We're trying. We'll see if we have a solution. We'll see if we have a solution. All right. Thanks for coming back, people. We're going to see if we have a solution. We're going to try one other thing. If that doesn't work, then we'll come up with a different solution. Think about it. We're going to have a solution. Daniel. There he is.
I can hear you, but I can't see you. Ah, there you are.
Okay. Great. I think it may be solved. Someone can let us know. We'll check it real quick, and then we'll move forward. Hey, Mom, thanks for coming back. I think the echo's gone.
This is not Rajel's fault, by the way. He knew about the earbuds, and I let my wife leave the house today in our main car with my earbuds sitting in the passenger seat. So it's on me.
It's all good. The feedback that we're getting is that everything seems to be working. That's the bottom line. That's what we wanted to hear. So good deal. All right, great. Thank you all so much for enduring us figuring out technology. Technology is a wonderful, wonderful thing when it works. So here we are, and everything seems like it's going well now. So perfect. Thank you so much for your patience. Really quickly, today we're going to do some talking about the subject of cultural navigation, cultural intelligence, and this is our first of a series of conversations that we're going to label as Let's Talk. We believe now more than ever that it is critical, that it's crucial for us to be able to talk about race, to talk about the challenges. The only way that you can solve a problem is to really dive into it, to dissect it, to get better understanding of it, to have empathy, to see all sides of a situation. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a forum where it is safe to talk about some of these important, challenging topics. And these topics we definitely go into great detail in as we tell our stories in our book, Wounds, as we tell our stories of how we have been in situations from childhood through adulthood where we've had to navigate and learn to navigate the challenges of race, of inequity, of navigating difference, of experiencing how to go from one environment to another, how to maneuver. And that's what cultural navigation begins to deal with, how to maneuver and how to be able to go into a situation, into a culture where you are the only one, where there is difference all around you, and how to positively navigate that. I got to pause just for one quick minute. Just allow me this. So excited to see Dwight joining us on this conversation. Just got news that today Dwight is getting a heart transplant. He's been waiting on it. He's been needing it. And so I just got to stop and pause and just be grateful and thankful to God. And we're so excited for you and praying for you. And the fact that you would stop by in the midst of all that I know you're going through, to stop and see what we got going on here means a whole lot. So I ask everybody who's on our line, if you would, I know everybody's from different belief systems, but if you would say a prayer and keep a thought for my brother, my friend Dwight today. This is a huge day, and we're excited about it. And we're praying for you and knowing and believing and trusting that everything is going to go smoothly. All right. Sorry, I had to step out of that just for a moment because that's just so critical and so crucial. We're excited for you. But yeah, so we're dealing with the topic of cultural navigation. And we tell our stories, like I said, from childhood through adulthood, both of us spending a large part of our time growing up in the Newaygo County area of Michigan, northwestern Michigan, I guess, is probably the best way I could try to put it directionally. Where the north begins and the pure waters flow is what the sign says when you enter White Cloud. But we have a lot of experience navigating difference. For me, racial difference. For Daniel, even before he came to that area, navigating the racial difference part, but then navigating a mindset difference and a structural difference, and all the differences that came with him moving to Newaygo County. So, in other words, we can be in a room where we're the only one. Daniel has developed that ability. I've seen throughout my time knowing him. He can go to a room full of Black folks and be all right, and be comfortable, or at least functional. I can go into a room full of white people and there's a sense of normalcy to it because that's the rooms that I grew up in, and can be comfortable and can be functional. But then we also can move into different rooms because it's not just black and white. I can move into a room with all Black people and completely be comfortable, as many of you would expect. Or, you know, this ability that we've learned to practice and we had a field to practice on growing up allows us to be able to cross that over, and we can go into rooms full of brown people, full of various cultures, every culture in between, and not have to freeze up, but be able to be functional in a variety of settings. And I believe that not that many people have that ability. Many people don't have to know how to do that. Many people of color are forced to do that on a regular basis. But many people, especially majority people in my experience, have not had to do that. They haven't had to be forced to have a situation where they do that on a consistent basis. But it is a skill that brings people into a deeper level of functionality. And so we want to talk about that a little bit today. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I might not have anything to say when Daniel starts throwing questions at me if I say too much in this opening, but I wanted to at least kind of lay a foundation. And with these talks, we're going to have some dialogue, but we absolutely want you to be able to engage us. And so if you have questions as we go along, feel free to put them in the chat. If you're not comfortable putting them in the chat, you can email those questions to us. We've been on the lookout to see if any of those questions were going to come through email too. You can email me at info at razeljones.com. You can email Daniel at daniel.abbott.fiction at gmail.com, ABBOTT. Daniel.abbott.fiction at gmail.com. At any point, if we can't get to the questions during the talk, we'll do our best to circle back around if at all possible. And we're looking forward to a great dialogue today. And so I wanted to start it off with a question that I have for you, Mr. Abbott. Again, I've been so impressed with you. As long as I've known you, I've recognized the ability in you to be able to navigate difference, to be able to navigate and to step in to cultural situations that would cause some people to freeze up. I don't know a lot. I mean, there are plenty, but I don't know a lot of white people who can go into a room full of Black people and navigate it successfully, and navigate it seemingly seamlessly, seemingly comfortably. But I've seen you do that for as long as I've ever known you. And so you seem naturally comfortable around Black people. So let's bring it down to that level. How do you do that? And how did this ability come about?
Well, it began in childhood, really. I think when it comes to racism or uncomfortable with difference, it all comes down to a fear of difference, intimidation by something that is out of your comfort zone or something you're not familiar with. And as far back as I can remember, I've always been a curious person. I've always been fascinated by things that weren't normal to me or the way that I went about my life. So growing up in Grand Rapids on the Northeast side, in a very diverse area, my friends were Black and brown and white and every race, religion in between. And I brought friends home, and my parents, no matter who I brought through the door, every single one of my friends treated the same by my parents. And, it starts with the family on a micro level. My view would be totally different if I had an experience bringing a friend home and my parents didn't respond the way that they responded, but there was no weirdness, awkwardness, nothing.
Right.
I have parents that raised me and my 4 siblings to just base a person on their character. And so my 2 best friends growing up, Larry and Matt. Larry is black. Matt is half Korean, half white. I'd go to Larry's house. His stepdad was white. I'd go to Matt's house, and Matt's mom didn't speak much English. She mostly spoke Korean, and he had a white stepdad. So I was stepping into, naturally, diverse situations, and it was normal. It wasn't weird to me that Larry's stepdad, Dom, was white. It wasn't weird to me that Matt's stepdad was white. It was just natural. So growing up in that situation, I grew up in what I like to consider organic diversity. It wasn't something forced. It wasn't something implemented by an institution. I was walking to a friend's house, and that's the situation I was walking into. It was normal. And going from that to Newaygo County, and Newaygo specifically was, like we get into in the book, it was culture shock. It was something totally different. And around the time I met you, which I probably would have been 15 or 16 at the time, I imagine, when I met you, I had gone through some pretty traumatic experiences in Newaygo. And the seemingly seamless that you referenced did not apply to the time I met you. The time I met you, I was hiding very much behind basketball, behind hip hop music, behind acceptance with my black friends like Stevie and Robert, who lived in White Cloud, a couple of years younger than Rajel. And I was the white boy. I was the hooper. I was the kid that could dunk. I was the kid that could dribble a basketball any way that you wanted to. So at that time in my life, it wasn't comfortable. I didn't like being the white boy. I didn't like being accepted, or so I thought, by being able to do things and by people not really knowing who I was or what I went through. And that transition for me became comfortable in that environment because I was accepted in that environment, but years and years of self-analysis and trying to figure out who I was. And now it's normal. When you're a teenager in puberty and going through all these different emotions, it's not normal. It's, you just try to survive your life. Like I imagine growing up black in White Cloud, I imagine you had a lot of the same experiences as I did.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I'll say to that, like, in White Cloud, growing up in a community like White Cloud, most of the time, especially in those elementary years, I was the only one. It's the term I often use to describe myself, the only, and some of you can probably relate to that. In your situations, you've probably been the only something, whether that be the only woman or the only person of your faith or the only person of color, whatever it may be. That is a difficult experience, as you described so eloquently, Daniel, especially to go through as really a child. You're not even in a position yet where you've been able to wrestle and grapple with identity. And yet you are forced to be in a position where you prematurely begin to find out through various situations that you are indeed different. I'm definitely different. And so to be able to begin to find your voice and to find your place of comfort in that is tricky, because first of all, you're just trying to figure out how to navigate this maturing body or this or to learn your lessons in your classes about English and read books. You don't know much of anything yet because you're indeed a child. You haven't had the opportunity to become who you are at that point. And so when you add this complex, challenging issue of navigating racial difference while you're trying to navigate everything else that you're trying to navigate, it feels impossible at times. And so for me, thankfully, I had, again, just as you mentioned, your parents were a big source of what allowed you to be able to develop the way that you did. I have to say my parents as well, but not just in making it okay and accepting for people who were different than us to enter into our environment, which that happened all the time, but also preparing me to recognize the beauty of my difference. And they did have to intentionally put me in environments where I had outlet for my own race because my everyday life didn't give me those outlets. When I went to school, it wasn't like I was able to find, especially through elementary school, a whole bunch of people who looked like me. Nobody in administration, nobody as a teacher. I didn't have a Black teacher until my third year of college, of undergraduate college at university. So there wasn't a place that felt safe racially, safe, and felt like home, even while I'm at home in my everyday experience. And so they intentionally did some things for me that I really much appreciate. I don't know how much they strategized and thought about it, but keeping me around family. You know, we took a lot of vacations and trips that really probably weren't vacations because it was to Chicago, to my uncle's house, to visit family on the west side, to visit family on the south side. And so that put me in environments where I was temporarily the majority in those neighborhoods over on Ashland. It put me in situations where, like church, on a weekly basis, church, we went to what would be classified as a Black church, Kojic, Church of God in Christ, hand clapping, foot stumping, tongue talking, Church of God, you know. And we were in that setting for those few hours on a weekly basis, the majority. And so those were my outlets to be able to navigate my own culture. Because what I did find is that a lot of people who grew up in our settings who didn't have intentionality like that, who didn't have outlets like that, kind of, it seemed, and I don't want to say this in a judgmental way, I don't mean it in a judgmental way, but it seemed like they sort of lost or didn't have deep knowledge of their own Blackness, their own cultural identity, and they had to do what they had to do to survive, and they ended up blending in. They ended up blending in the white environments. Thankfully for me, I didn't have to just blend in. Now, there were times where emotionally I felt like maybe I should. And I had the ability to. I knew how to talk like everybody around me talked. I knew how to do what was seen as appropriate in cultural settings because I had been around it my whole life. But I also had this ability to understand, to relate to, and to turn on my Blackness in a way that may or may not have been appreciated or accepted in the cultures that I was in on a daily basis. So that's part of the foundations of what gave me the ability, what gave you the ability as well to navigate different cultures, is because we didn't only have one homogenous experience. And that homogenous experience that many have keeps them trapped within the same circles, trapped, I believe we say in the book, in a room full of broken mirrors where everybody looks like them, and that homogenous nature, it cuts you and it limits you and it keeps you from being able to have a full experience in those settings. So let me ask you this, Daniel. So when I went to college, I went to Grand Valley initially. That was the first college I went to. I encountered many Black people from Black environments who didn't have that same ability to navigate different cultures. Matter of fact, I can remember, I could call names, but I won't just in case they're on here. I remember some people who I met from Chicago, from Detroit, and from Flint, who had never been in an experience where white was the majority. they had, in a sense, been shielded from difference, and they experienced their own homogenous experience because, you know, their circles really revolved around, and there are a lot of reasons for this, systemically, redlining, all sorts of stuff can factor into it, but all they had experience with was other Black people. So to move into Allendale, Michigan, they soon found out that the world is bigger than their particular neighborhood, and they had to encounter white people, and many of them for the first time were dealing with white people on an extended basis and on an intimate level. And there was even what I would perceive as a fear at times. And I had no fear of white people. I felt, you know, I felt equal. I felt like I knew how to get on the same level. I felt like I could excel academically just as well because of my experience. It's not because I'm so great, but it's because of the experience that I've been blessed to have. So here we go. And here's the other piece of it. Most of the white people that I grew up with would have felt completely inept attempting to navigate a completely Black culture and to be able to switch like that. But you know, you were able to. My question for you, and I know this is an opinion, but why does it seem that most people can't successfully navigate difference? Why do you feel that most people can't at least feel like they can't successfully navigate difference?
I'm going to get right at that question, but you said something in your last piece that really hit home with me. You were talking about blending in White Cloud as a person of color in White Cloud, blending to fit in. How you were able to maintain your identity successfully without blending in. You navigated the white culture, you navigated the Black culture, you were able to maintain your identity in that situation. Mm-hmm. And you spoke on other people of color that were not able to do that and had to blend in to survive. The word survive is really hitting home because we both have a lot of really good mutual friends from White Cloud that are good people, very good, and that I would not consider racist people. And they might have one or two really good Black friends from that area. And what a lot of white people that I know fail to realize and recognize is what a person of color has to do to blend in, what a person of color has to give up to be accepted. Yeah. You conform sometimes to a white status quo for the sake of survival. And you give up some of yourself. Right. And you didn't have to do that. You were successful. And there's so many other people that haven't been successful in that situation. And really important that our white friends that are good people understand that dynamic of the people of color in a white environment. And I think a lot of people miss that. And I mean, we're on social media with a lot of good people posting things that make us shake our heads, but not say anything because they're good people. Right. Because we don't want to air them on social media. But that's important. Right. You don't survive it's critical. A situation where you are different without giving up something, because if you are yourself, you get pushback. Like we both witnessed, like I experienced in Nuevo when I was there. But to circle back on your question about Grand Valley and other people not being able to successfully navigate, I think it's negative experiences and fear. Had I, as a 10-year-old boy, walked into Larry's house and got treated with contempt by his parents and by his siblings, instead of getting treated with love and with respect and with acceptance, you know, I might have a different attitude, but that wasn't my journey. I walked into Larry's house and was fed a meal by his mother. I was treated with and teased by his sisters. Right. I was treated kindly. You know, it was a good experience. When I moved in
Right.
with the Cartwrights, I was put on punishment with Latrice. I was whooped with a fly swatter while I was bench pressing in the back room. I was treated just like a member of their family, and because I had all those positive experiences, right. I was able to separate black from white. I had positive experiences in my own family. My parents treated me well. They loved me. They raised me right. It's not a black-white thing, person thing. I've had negative experiences with black people, but because I've had a diverse set of experiences,
right.
I'm able to not make it a black or white thing. I make it a person thing. And many people that are exposed to a lot of different cultures and have negative experiences with cultures, be it a black person from Detroit going to Allendale for the first time, their experiences in Detroit with white people may not have been good experiences. So they bring those experiences to Allendale, surrounded by whiteness, and of course they're going to be on their guard. Of course they're going to be looking around and intimidated and sticking mostly to people that look and talk and act like them. And I just think it's a matter of exposure and, like I mentioned earlier, organic diversity, not I'm including you, I'm doing this in that condescending way, but we're together. We have to do this together, and I'm getting to know you. I'm getting to know the things I don't like about you, things I like about you, and it stops being about the color of your skin. It starts being about who you are.
Yeah, yeah. Just jumping back real quick before we even move on, back to the giving something up in order to blend in thing. We can't seem, neither one of us wants to leave that all the way alone yet. That's like when I think what many times majority people don't realize and recognize, and please recognize when I say majority people, I'm talking about whoever the majority is in the particular situation that you're in. I currently work at a HBCU, TSU, what's up, Tigers, where black people, we're the majority in that particular setting. So I think what people of the majority don't always realize is that what they're requiring is for individuals actually to give something up in order to be accepted in that situation. So you can't really bring all of who you are in because, in white environments, if I bring in all my blackness at a job interview, then I won't get the job. If I come into the interview speaking Ebonic language, then there's going to be an assumption made that I'm not as smart, I'm not as prepared. And so we are required to assimilate. And, I know we're in this country that likes to label itself as the melting pot, which in essence, that metaphor in itself is problematic. I don't want to melt. I don't want to have to leave parts of me behind in order to be united. We can unite even in our differences. Our differences are beautiful. We are beautifully different. And so a requirement to assimilate in order to be seen as equal, to be seen as capable, to be seen as intelligent, is problematic from the beginning. Because the fact that I bring the way I talk or the way I navigate situations or the way I dress, whatever that may be, if I bring that in, that does not lessen my ability for impact. Matter of fact, it probably opens your business that I'm working in up to more networks, to more markets, to more opportunities, to more money. But the minute that you require me to be just like everybody else, then we are just robots and we lose the opportunities that truly do come with diversity. So assimilation and that unspoken and even unnoticed demand for assimilation hurts everybody in the process. We need to be able to celebrate the beauty of our differences and bring everything to the table, is my opinion. Yeah. Right. I agree. I agree.
You touch on it in the
Oh,
book, and
okay.
we've talked about this a lot privately, but you struggle with code switching. You code switch naturally,
Yeah.
and then you shake your head and you
Hmm.
get frustrated, and you're tired of doing it. You want to be you. Can you explain to
Yeah.
the people listening
Yeah.
some of the things you've told me and the dynamics of learning to code switch and now later in life trying to unlearn
Yeah.
the art of code switching?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Code switching is a challenge. It's a challenge for me, psychologically at this point in my life. It was a means of survival. It was a means of acquiring opportunities at a young age. So let me back up. What code switching is, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. It is me being able to speak one language or one dialect successfully, and then in observing the environment I'm in, switch over to speaking another language or another dialect successfully. So, for instance, I studied English language and literature in my undergrad. Trust me, in the papers, I had to be able to have a good grasp of speaking. What's the best way of speaking English properly, right? Of using the language effectively, according to all of the standard rules that exist for American English. And so, but at the same time, because of many of my social connections, I could quickly switch over to Black dialect. To some people call it Ebonics. I could go back into the situation, and then middle school we started having more Black people and stuff moving to the school. And so one of our favorite activities, what we spent most of our time doing, was what Mom Diane would have called playing the dozens, what the older generations of Black folks would call playing the dozens, where we would do everything we can to use language to basically insult you for fun. That's what we were doing. And so you couldn't do that in a standard English vernacular. You couldn't say, hey, your feet are really big. That's not going to be as effective as if you can jump into language and be like, boy, your feet so big. So it's that switching, that code switching. It's recognizing your environment and being able to change your language to fit what's needed in that environment. I still have to do it in some professional circles. Again, if I'm going to a job interview, then I have to make sure that I'm presenting how it will be perceived as professional. And I don't like that. So that's what Daniel's talking about, the frustration with it. I don't think that's a fair playing field. I don't think that's a level playing field. And so for survival, especially as a young adult, I learned that, okay, I better switch my language up in a way that's going to be acceptable to white people. And so I better speak properly. I better be careful about how I'm placing my verbs and all of that. And so I know how to do it. I know how to do it, but I don't like. The older I get, the more I'm like, why do I have to always conform to rules that are set by someone else who is determining my capability, my intellect, my ability to do a job based on how they perceive the language that I'm using. And so now I do it if I have to. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's intentional. And, my family got to eat, so I need a job. Uh, so I do it when needed. What frustrates me is when I do it and didn't realize that I just did it. When I look back at it like, oh, man. Or when when Camille hears me talking on a phone call and she'll be like, oh, you talking to somebody white that time. I'm like, wait, what? I don't like that I change without even paying attention because I've had to do that for survival. I'm at a point in my life where I've put myself in positions where I don't have to do that for survival as much. Again, I'm at an HBCU. A lot of my social settings, I get to choose what they look like. And so I don't have to do it as much, but sometimes I still find myself doing it. So like if I'm in a training situation, I try now, I have to think about it and be very intentional to make sure that I'm being me, that I'm not going into a role, that I'm not acting, but that I'm instead finding. And who am I? I'm the guy that meets somewhere in the middle of it. Like I don't talk like on a normal level. I don't talk just like real hood. That's not who I am. But I also don't talk amazingly proper and nasal and all that. Like so, like I have to find like I also often have to work to make sure that okay, Rajel, be Rajel, and that's somewhere in the middle. And that somewhere in the middle makes black people, white people, brown people, red people, makes everybody uncomfortable. And I have to be okay with that. Like, okay, they're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to make certain judgments about me. Fine, let them do that. But I've reached a point in life where it's like, well, at the end of the day, I know what I have to offer. And most of the people I deal with know what I have to offer now, too. So I need to stop worrying about that. And I need to stop forcing myself to code switch when it's probably not even necessary.
It's got to be hard.
That many times anymore.
I mean, this reminds me of a conversation Vanessa and I had a couple weeks ago. My wife Vanessa is the only person of color in her office, and if you know Vanessa, she's smart as a whip, hard worker. You put her in a situation, within weeks she is making that situation better. She's making your company better. And as the only person of color in her office, she feels this weight to represent her entire culture in that office. She can't get upset and put somebody in her place because she doesn't want to be the quote unquote stereotypical black woman. Oh, she's acting like a black woman. She can't step out of her comfort zone in any way. She's always got to be on guard because she feels that pressure as a black woman in corporate America to represent to a higher standard than what's perceived by white corporate America. And it's a lot of pressure. And a lot of people that aren't people of color, like, really have no idea what that pressure must be like.
Right. I mean, honestly, like I can think of conversations growing up with my dad where he would sit me at the dining room table and say, son, I need you to understand, you have to be twice as good to be seen as half as good. You have to be twice as good to be seen as half as good. Think about that. That is pressure on a young teenager. So I already know, like, if you want to get the opportunity, you have to show that they can't afford to skip you over. And that's pressure that most people don't live with. That's pressure that most people don't even have to think about. I have an HR background, and I know that many people get hired because they know somebody. They get hired because they're in the same club or they go to the same church. And it doesn't even have anything to do with skill set. So to think about how that juxtaposition of how many people of color know that's not going to work out so well for me. Instead, I have to show that if you don't hire me, you're going to miss out. That it's a different playing field. It's a different playing field. And I see that several questions are coming in from you all, and I want to make sure that we have time to address some of those too. But Daniel and I have a couple more things that I want to make sure that we hear from Daniel on is really what I want to, because I love his perspective because it's unique. And so I want to ask a couple more questions. Then Daniel, I think maybe we can go to some of these questions in the chat. Thank you all so much for engaging us. Keep on sending them. But I wanted to ask you kind of along those same lines. Daniel, as long as I've known you, you've been around Black people. Someone has described you as a former white rapper, even. You've been around hip hop culture. You've been around us up at the mill pond when we when we balling out, when we hooping. You know, the book talks about the difference between hooping and playing basketball. You've been a hooper as long as I've known you. You've been around Black culture, but I've never seen you fall victim, in my opinion, to cultural appropriation. So cultural appropriation is kind of when you steal someone else's culture, you use it for your gain, and there's some negativity attached to it, and you don't give proper credit, and you don't like. I've never seen you trying to be black, how black people would sometimes describe it. I've never seen you stealing from black culture in a way, like you are who you are naturally. So I wanted to talk about that, even as it relates to that whole code switching conversation. I haven't seen you do that in a way that is offensive. I know some people, don't get me wrong, I know some white people that are engulfed and engaged in black culture that I'm like, that didn't seem genuine. It seemed like you were trying too hard. I never have felt that, and I mean that. I never have felt that from you. Can you tell me a little bit about how you have navigated that, and how that has been, how you've been able to be successful in engulfing in the culture without falling prey and victim?
It was a learning and growing process, pretty much. Life events. We discussed my childhood a little bit in Grand Rapids, where I was around people of color organically. My friends were black, my friends were Hispanic and Asian and white, and it was normal. Being different was normal. And the move to Newaygo County was, it was traumatic in a lot of ways. It was not only culture shock, and I'll share this really brief story from the book about my experience in Newaygo and what led me to the level of comfort that you're describing. My freshman year, I moved to Newaygo, kicking and screaming. My parents brought me there. And a couple weeks into the school year, my two best friends, Matt and Larry, came for the weekend. And we were downtown, dribbling our basketballs, doing whatever. I don't remember exactly what we were doing. But that following Monday, a student at Newaygo came up to me at my locker and asked me, "Who is that shadow following you around this weekend?" And I really had no idea what he meant. So I asked him, what do you mean? And that nigger. He said the word. And that's not a word I grew up with. Mm-hmm. It's not a word I heard my family say. Mm-hmm. It's not a word I heard my friends say. And it blew me back. And from that day forward, at Newaygo High School, my freshman year, I was nigger lover. I was white nigger. I was wigger. A group of seniors in a government class used to hit me over the head with newspapers. I spent that year with my head down, getting angry. I was a little guy. I was 5'3", like $115, and I was a basketball player. And I kept my head down that year, and I grew. I got angry, and a lot of that stuff went away, but the anger didn't. And when I met Stevie at a basketball tournament my freshman year, I started spending more time in White Cloud and met Robert Trice, and I met you, though I only kind of knew you at that. We got to know each other later. And Cartwrights. And during that time of my life, I was just loved and accepted by Black people at a time when white people were treating me very poorly. And as a teenager struggling with your identity, I think I just developed a level of comfort around Black people because I had developed a level of discomfort around white people. And it carried over in life. And I struggled a lot in my 20s and even my early 30s with that until finally I was just like, I'm me. I'm going to be me. And like me, love me, take me any way you want. I'm just going to be me. And that was always my attitude. But, for years as a teenager and a young adult, I didn't really know what me meant. I didn't really know my place in Black culture, but I wasn't ever trying to be anything else. I was a dude that liked hip hop and dunking on people, So that's what I did.
Yeah, That's powerful, man. That's powerful. And it's so interesting to me as I read those chapters that you wrote, like however many times, a lot, and they're amazing. When like just thinking about how you were guilty by association, and so those same slurs that were thrown at us for nothing more than mere melanin count, which is a social construct in the first place of race. Um, those same slurs went to you, not even because of melanin count, because if you take a quick look at my brother here, there's not a ton of
No.
melanin over there. Um, but yet, by association, the same derogatory comments, the same terms, the same slurs, the same attempts of intimidation, the same anger, just because of an openness, not a acting like, just because I'm open, like I'm not closed off to people of color. Just that association alone moved you into being categorized with the most negative labels that people could come up with, just because of the association. That's a root of bitterness and hate that I will never understand, never condone, and never stop fighting against.
I'm with you. 100%.
Yeah. So I know you are. That's why we did this together. Trust me. Somebody asked me a question the other day. They said, "Who is the guy who wrote the book with you?" And it was a black person. I knew what their question meant. And I was like, "Look, you don't even got to worry about it, because I wouldn't have wrote this book with somebody who didn't understand. I wouldn't have taken that project on. So I have mad respect for you. I am seeing that there are a ton of comments and questions. Thank you all so much for your engagement. I want to make sure that we give a little bit of time to that. Before I move to that, Daniel, if there's anything else that you want, I know we had a whole plan and agenda. If there's anything that you want to take a look at, if you want to discuss any of it while I'm looking at it, that would be great.
Yeah, there was one I wanted to address, and this is, we touched briefly on a lot of the social media comments that we see, and we shake our heads and we don't say anything because they're good people. They're good people that don't know any better. And the thing that comes to mind, and I'll just revert back to our sheet one time, because there's something that really sparked, and it was, have I dealt with racism or negative situations with black people? And that's absolutely. I mean, countless times.
Right.
And honestly, probably I've dealt with more negative racial situations with black people than I have white people. I've been in, yeah, exactly.
Tell us more about that.
An important point that I want to make too. Like countless times I've been the only white person in a black situation. And if I'm with my friends and my friends' family, that's never been a problem at all. I've been accepted. Let me, as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, be at a basketball court and be the only white person there. I'm sitting on a basketball trying to get in the game, and I'm not getting picked up. So, because I'm white, of course.
Right.
So my response was always, get onto this court and murder him. And that's what I did. I got in that court, I handled my business, and the next time I came to that court, I got picked up. That's the way it went. Now, the feeling of being judged by the color of my skin was horrible. It is horrible every time it happens. But the difference between me and a person of color is when I leave that situation, I get to go back to being white. I get to go back to being white.
Yeah.
Racism exists in every culture. The difference between white systemic racism and every other brand of racism is white systemic racism has the power to oppress on a macro level all other brands of racism can only oppress on a micro level. And we have to deal with the micro for sure.
Right.
But the difference is the experiences that I've had, the reason why I don't take them as hard as I've taken a lot of the other experiences is because, like I said, I get to go back to being a white man in America. And that's a very safe thing to
be. I can't even imagine. But yeah, I mean, it's so true. Like, there are situations where, as people of color, we have power, but it's micro. It's not the macro systems. It's not, we've talked a little bit about redlining. We've talked about hiring, racism and hiring. Like, we have power on a limited level. Now, we're powerful. Don't get those two things twisted. We're powerful people, but systemically, it's on a micro level. So I appreciate that you said that, because I was about to circle with more questions. But no, it's such a valid point. Now, I've seen, even in these situations, I told you I work at the HBCU. I've been involved in what's called black churches. I don't know what a black church really is, but the way people use the term. I've been involved in situations where we are the majority. And unfortunately, we don't always handle those right either. Unfortunately, we at times become what we hate. And we use the power that we have in the same way that we convict and persuade others not to. And so my challenge to us as people of color, because we do have power, and I believe that more power is coming to us, because there's a level of preparation. The statistics show that Black females are the most educated demographic of people in the world. That's leading to having more power, to having more influence. My challenge to us is that as we get that power, that we do not become what we have been victimized by, and that we handle it with more grace, with more mercy, that we make sure that we're bringing people into the environment, that we're bringing diverse viewpoints and conversations into leadership, that we're strategically using diversity in a positive way and being welcoming to others regardless of the differences. Just because we think different, just because we look different, doesn't mean that we can't gel, that we can't find complementary partnerships and work together to produce great results. Thank you, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm looking at a few of the comments. I haven't read them all the way, but thanks, Marlon. I see, just affirming what we talked about. I think we covered that. Still trying to blend in, but they don't want to admit what we've had to do to blend it. Yeah, we've had to give up so much to find success at times. Susan Williams said, I know for myself, even as a Black person, I did not realize until recently what I had to give up. So back to that conversation about assimilation, about giving things up, the level of dignity and freedom to fully be myself. It is a deep hurt and wound that I took on and have carried up until now. Yeah, sometimes we feel those pains later. Like, man, why did I allow myself to give that up? But sometimes we are, again, in a place of survival. So now I've had to deal with this and make a decision to figure out how to maintain relationship with white people. That's a great point, and we do deal with that in the book too, that at times we have to go through a process of healing as people of color, so that we don't start lumping every white person we see into the category of oppressor. Sometimes that's difficult work, and I know people don't always all the way understand that, but sometimes we have to go away. I've worked mostly at predominantly white institutions most of my career. And there's a reason why we have affinity groups, why we have DEI groups, why we have these places where we can steal away. And I'm not going to tell you everything we talk about, but we do talk about, man, did you just experience that craziness? These white folks acting crazy. We do have those conversations. I'm not going to lie to you. But we have to go decompress so that we don't fall into the trap of lumping. And lumping is what I like to call it. We lump everybody into, like, everybody's racist, everybody's against me, everybody's an oppressor. And so we sometimes have to go away so that we can come back and continue to be positive. Javon, forced to assimilate. Carla, thanks for being with us today. She said, I'm hearing some echo back again, I think, right now from somewhere. Something changed. Carla said, it seems like many white people do not know of redlining and other policies at the core of systemic racism. What are some strategies for bringing history into awareness? Oh, that's great. Well, reading, we're authors. Reading, I think, is one. There, it went away. Reading is one of the most fundamental ways. The more knowledge that we can gain, the better we are equipped to make sure that we know. Yeah, the echoing is still coming back again. But I'm currently reading a couple great books. In addition to Wounds, absolutely read Wounds, but How to Be an Anti-Racist. Good job of looking at that systemic stuff, as well as White Fragility. And another one that I'm reading is, well, I finished reading, and I Austin Channing Brown, a former co-worker, her book, and why is the name of it escaping me? Help me if you know it, or type it if you know it. How am I forgetting it? But I know the subtitle has to do with Black dignity. Yeah, it will come up. We'll put it in the chat but it's an amazing book that continues to tell these stories. But all of them begin to touch on some of the historical and systemic racism is real. Let me say it for the people in the back. And anti-racism training is necessary. But yeah, absolutely. These are important things. Reading, being aware, being engaged in these conversations, I think helps to be able to do that. Great. I think that the echoing went away. Glad to hear that. Daniel, do you see any of those other questions coming through? I'm still working on it. Oh, I think I lost Daniel. Oh, I'm alone. Let me see. I'll look here. Thank you so much for your comments, Matusi. Good to see you, Matusi. That's my guy. Enjoying the candor of the discussion. We need more of this. We plan on doing more of this. Absolutely. Definitely, we want to have these discussions. We want to think. If we can think critically, that would solve a lot of our problems. And if we're open and believe what people are telling us about what they're experiencing, that will solve a lot of our problems as well. Thanks, Joe. And we're looking forward to our podcast conversation coming up with you. Micro versus macro, great point. Thanks, Aunt Delonda. Your conversation is captivating. Thanks for your transparency. Great. I'm trying to see if there's any others. I think that's most of them. What does redlining mean? That's a question that I just saw. Redlining was a practice. Thanks for the question. Redlining was a practice in real estate where Black people were only sold houses in certain areas and certain neighborhoods and weren't allowed to purchase in other. And so it's related to the concepts of things like white flight, where when a Black person moved in the neighborhood, white people said, I'm moving out. Property value just went down. So, that's a quick answer to that question, but it's the real estate practices that were systemically put in place, which unfortunately the conversations are still happening as people are being told that their suburbs are in danger because Black people are beginning to buy houses in certain areas. So it's a long practice that happened ever since back with the GI Bill, when people came back from serving their country, people of color, they couldn't get housing, even though the GI Bill was supposed to grant it to them because the real estate agents wouldn't sell it to them in certain areas. And that's what formed our modern, what people classify as ghettos in certain neighborhoods because of those practices initially. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, great read. A City Within a City deals with that whole concept of redlining very, very well. Okay, Daniel said he's trying to join back. Let me try to get him again. There we go. We're proving him back. Great, great, great. Let me see. Am I missing any more questions? Let me see. I can't see them all in the chat. So, Camille, if you could send those to me if I'm missing any others. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, Dr. Kendi is an amazing thinker and thought leader on these subjects. There he is. Welcome back, Daniel.
There he is. Welcome back, Daniel.
Oh, man.
Phone died.
Yeah, I think there's an echo back now, too. But I think we're actually getting close to our time and the conclusion of it. Let me see. All right. Yep. She said that was it as far as questions. Hey, we're going to have more of these discussions coming soon. Certainly want to encourage you. Purchase Wounds. I believe it's a great read. We're getting great feedback from our initial readers. You can go to either one of our websites. www.razeljones.com or danielabbottfiction.com or summercamppublishing.com. Also, you can find links on Daniel's site to purchase it on Amazon, or you can search on Amazon for Wounds. My name is unique, so that's a good way to search for it. If you do Wounds Razel, there's not a lot of Razels, Razel. So that's how I usually search for it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all sorts of places that you can get it. We have information about Goodreads giveaways. We had a great talk yesterday about many resources and a lot of the things that we have coming up. Go back and watch that. It's still available for playback. So absolutely, if you have more questions, feel free to send those to us via email, info@razeljones.com or daniel.abbott.fiction@gmail.com. And I just had a great thought. I should stop talking because I'm echoing. And Daniel, if you could wrap us up, that might be good for the echo purposes.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate the conversation because these are conversations that need to be had. Our country has become a party politics country, and racial inequality has been getting lost right in the middle of that. And in Wounds, it's not a book about party politics. It's a book about human rights that all good people of all colors, all religions can agree needs to happen in our country. And these conversations need to be had. And Razel and I are standing together as a white man and a black man, as lifelong friends, and as brother-in-laws. And you know, it's been a blessing, both learning about myself writing this book. And we hope it impacts you and can contribute to more conversations on the topic.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And we'll talk to you soon.